Hello,
Good morning, Dr. Brad.
Doolittle. My coffee is growing cold because I'm not in the 21st century with the rest of you guys.
I think we need like a special ed class for you in computer.
Oh my, it's true. I won't deny it.
Say, I don't care, Doolittle. I'm not interested. That's
Right?
that's like there's some line you have the sequence. I don't care. I'm
I'm,
not interested.
dude,
And and
there's a guy that stands on the street that people say reminds them of me, and he carries a cardboard sign that says poor. And I was going to get a sign on the opposite street that I could wear in my coat and tie that says indifferent. Now, I'm going to show you what
oh,
I
that's awesome.
see this right here. Hang on.
Yes.
It's a little skull image that,
Yes.
that I'm going to use to make my art. Now,
Oh
this
no.
thing I bought on Amazon, it looks like it was printed, like 3D printed. And I'm like, that's freaking awesome because it only cost 3 cents to make it and they charge $8 for it. I'm like,
Yep.
that's what we call a good way to make a buck. Okay. We have some things to talk about today, Kurt, because there's some ambiguity in our conversations that now has to be clarified.
You're
And it
pretty
has to
good
do
at
with
that.
this, it has to do with the aggressions of the New World Order globalist World Economic Foundation, whatever they're called,
Yeah.
forum. Because they have this principality has usurped the sovereignty of Western civilization and is aggressing against the remainder of the world.
That's a
Specific,
pretty that's a pretty pejorative look at it.
yes, that's exactly correct. It is. It's pejorative enough. It is descriptive is the other word that I would use. Because
How about negative?
it's perfectly negative because it is negative. It is usurpers have taken over your civilization and are using it against other civilizations. And they are negative.
Okay.
They're in fact evil is the word I would use. And the
Okay, so
Brazilians are having an open war with communists in Brazil.
yes.
Well, that's right. They're doing it right. We're simply being trod upon in the West still.
Well, yeah, well, that's a good there's a really rich discussion under those underneath that comparison between why is Brazil doing this? Why is Western Europeans not? And that's a really fascinating contrast because of the insight we gain from that analysis. Whereas if you had gone to the 1870s, to the Anglo-American westward expansion, and you had confronted them with what we call communism, they would have reacted like the Brazilians. And if the Brazilians had not given up, had not taken up socialism, and had followed with capitalism, in other words, there's nothing holding back from Brazil to be America. It's huge, right? I mean, their geography sucks dick, but aside from that, it's a huge resource rich country with a lot of territory. They would probably tolerate communism the way we tolerate it. And so the interesting question is, why is that the case? Why are we tolerant of it now, but we wouldn't have been in the past? Why is Israel, not Israel, fuck Brazil. Sorry, I don't know how I did that. It's the ill, so why does Brazil react accordingly, and not as we do currently. And the answer is that what's your perception of your relative position? In other words, Brazil's relative position is they want to catch up.
I would argue that their position is that if they don't make a stand, they're going to be run over like the American losers are, and stay run over because there will be no place to retreat to. So they wanted to make sure their country did not get taken over by these communists.
They hardly need to think about America at all. They have Venezuela.
Yeah, but they have communist usurpers attempting to steal their elections, as we have had here.
Right, but they're not looking at us. They're looking at their neighbor.
I don't care. I just say they're doing it right. Wait, I told you about my indifferent plaque.
That your indifference doesn't affect the causality. It only affects
I don't care why. I don't care.
That's like a non-argument. It's like my thinking can affect reality.
I think that they think that they're being attacked by communists, and they wish to not be conquered by communists.
Right, but why are they thinking like that, and why are our people not?
They're less comfortable than we are.
That's half of it. They also see themselves as trying to catch up rather than ahead. And so we're overconfident. What you're saying is, well, we're too comfortable. I agree. But also civilizationally, we already think we're superior. See, that we have this belief that we can endure it. And they have this belief that we can become.
I think we just have a minority of people that would wish to do the same thing, and our military is a conquered unit as well.
Okay, I mean,
because it's like this. It's like what there is nothing to stop the United States military from doing the exact same damn thing, besides the fact that they're a bunch of pussies that are conquered by the communists. Because they usurped the election in this country the same as they did in Brazil. So their military has the stones to stand up and not be conquered by communists, and ours doesn't.
Well, that's because our military has correctly understood its position, but nobody has come to the military and asked them to solve the problem. Because it has to be, here's the answer. Like I said, you have to exhaust, convert. We have to make, the military is only going to act if we've exhausted alternatives, because that's the only time when they have the moral license to act. So we have to exhaust persuasion. Well, we lost that argument. We have to exhaust voting. Well, due to immigration, we lost that argument.
I don't agree with this argument here. I find that to be fallacious.
Well, that's because you're projecting into the mind of the military.
No. You're projecting into the mind of the electorate that the election was somehow lawful.
You are doing a wonderful job of conflating things while I'm trying to disambiguate them. And so I'm having, there's now at least three layers of conflation going on. And I'm like,
no, but it's like this. The question is the election legal?
It doesn't matter if you can't convince anyone.
If you're not allowed to air the case, it doesn't matter either.
The case is aired in public every day. It's been aired in court 75 fucking times. The answer is that you can't, that there's not enough evidence of this to be done to make a case. And so either it's done, and that's just it. So when we look at it, we're like, well, we knew what they were going to do. They were going to use vote harvesting to do it. But the way we allowed them to use the what do you call it, the infection, the plague there, the COVID episode, to use to justify vote harvesting, which they use. but there's nothing mysterious about that, other than that's exactly what they did, and we know, right? And so they did vote harvesting, but if they said, well,
we agree that occurred.
right? But after all the work we've done, we can't find evidence, or at least very much of it, that there's enough malfeasance going on there to alter the course of the election.
Wait, I don't believe that has been heard by a court.
Well, you'd have to have evidence to get there, right? And so
no, you have to have standing to make the evidence known to the court.
Correct.
And no court has heard the case, to my understanding.
No case has produced sufficient evidence on its facts to raise that case to a question at the federal circuit court level. And so
my understanding is that they have kicked all of them out by procedural standing issues. You don't have standing, so we're not going to hear the case. We're without regard to anything that's in the case.
I think that's probably true. Right,
so
but
the case hasn't been aired at all. It hasn't been reviewed at all.
That's not at all. There are the ones. So again, what you're conflating is those cases that were thrown out because there's no evidence, and those cases that were thrown out because they don't have standing. Now, there's cases where they don't have standing. There are possible corruptions because of that. In other words, we have the hole in one of the holes in our Constitution is that the states are control the method by which they conduct voting, right? But they're not. That was envisioned at a time where we still meant you had to show up to vote. And so what's happened is that without that clarification, we've created the ability for states to use local procedure to affect federal outcomes. Right, that's what's happened. Right, that makes perfect sense. That criticism is true. I mean, you have it in your state, right? You have problems like this in your state. So, and we've had definite abuses of the system at the federal level, which was to disempower the territories against the states, right? By this, which led to this gerrymandering shit. So we've led to all that crap going on when it should have been secessions, right? Regions should have moved to the geography that represented their politics rather than gerrymandering. So, and now we've empowered the cities against the territories. Right? So there's a bunch of things that have happened, but that's different from saying somebody rigged the fucking election, right? And so so when I look at it, I'm like, this they used to rig elections in Chicago and New York as a matter of course, right? I mean, the very existence of unions is for the purpose of rigging elections, right? I mean, that's really what the purpose they serve. The other benefits they serve are a side benefit of the ability to rig elections. So when you say this, I'm like, okay, well, that's great, but from the court's perspective, you and I are talking about there's a weakness in our legal system, right? That's true, but there's no conspiracy to commit a crime that, in other words, that outside of what's permissible, right? So these things are permissible. The problem
I don't find that to be the case.
Well, I mean, we couldn't prove that the movie that came out was legit. I mean, that failed. What is it? The ballot harvesting movie, whatever.
2,000 Mules.
Right. So
it goes like this:
these things don't meet. I mean, you can sit there because you believe in it and you can try to reinforce it. But I have
no.
I can say, wait a minute. I can sit here as a judge and say, I can see what the problem is, right, in this electoral process. And that problem turns out to be a product of prior decisions that the court is basing its judgments on. Now, if I would say that the problem was that I would agree with this, that the Supreme Court punted, right, on hearings about this because they're terrified about that that the Supreme Court is and the military the last legitimate portions of the government. And so they made a decision not to get involved in this because all it does is hurt them and it doesn't result in settled law. So they punted it. Well, so who's left to decide it? There's nobody to decide. Right? There's no monarchy to go to as a judge of last resort to decide. So where can this court be held? Well, if you're not going to go to in other words, this court, it has to be held in the legislature. But the legislature is the problem. It's the result of this. So how do we there's no court. In other words, this is right. I mean,
I understand what you're saying.
Right. So there's no court. And if I'm the court, I can't see how to resolve this by the law, even if it's true, because it's all taking place according to law. So we don't have the court, we don't have the right to bring a case before Congress. We've lost it. We don't have a monarchy to bring a case before when the parliament fails. The only thing we've got left is guns. I mean, that's the answer, is that you got to say, because the court can't really reject a case unless it can find a reason. But the Congress can ignore a case all day long, and they do.
Yes.
And so who do we go without a monarchy? We have no judge of last resort.
Right. So that issue is the failure of all institutions to resolve this problem.
Yes.
In the United States.
Right. So that's a real problem, right?
But it didn't. But in Brazil, it didn't happen that way.
Well,
they didn't. Their institutions did not fail. The military has a Supreme Court which overruled the civil Supreme Court.
Right, but they have that structure, yep, and we don't.
Yes.
So our rule of law is working. This sounds horrible. Like,
it is.
I'm speaking the truth. It's just horrible.
Wait, how? Okay, it is absolutely in failure. It's like you can say
right.
It's working. No. It's like
it's
working like a goddamn heart attack. It's like, oh my god, this is we got communists in charge, and you call this working? Lawless communists are in charge. They steal everything.
Wait.
That's working, Kurt. I say no, sir.
I know what it sounds like, but rule of law is working. It's just working badly.
Okay. Wait. This is going to be a college question for you and your little blue book, Kurt. Compare and contrast the failure of rule of law and what we have now, which is working. Shit.
Well,
honestly.
No.
Wait. I've got to stop for a second. The hilarity is getting to be too great.
This is episode 2. This is you're not
episode 2105, and hit like and subscribe because this is so damned exciting. I can't even tell you. And leave some voluptuous comments below because Kurt is making things that make no logical sense to me.
We've stumbled into the structural problem.
What's the structural problem? I'm writing that.
We've actually got rule of law, and it actually fucking works. In other words, people don't work. People try to work within the rule of law, right? Or that's different from individuals taking initiative, regardless of what the law is, which is the absence of rule of law. So the thing is,
okay, but I will ask you for an admission, which is that we have lawless communists in charge that disregard the rule of law, They
I
like
say,
to put up the appearance of obeying the law, and they are legal positivists.
okay, so you started two.
I
No,
know,
no,
I
listen to me.
apologize.
No, this is smart. No, you're what you've done is confusingly, distractedly, and absurdly created the taken the conservative passion, right? And you've presented it in the usual conservative means of expression that passion. But you've made two statements so far, which are pretty interesting. The first one was, I lost it already.
Godless communists are in charge.
No,
of
that's
my
the second topic.
Okay.
First
The
topic.
first one is that the legal the election was not
That's before. No, the
decidedly
first
legal.
topic you started with. I can't.
Brazil.
No, it was before Brazil.
Lawless communists are in charge of Western civilization.
All right, you've
are
made the point.
aggressive.
You've shown that you started out. There was hopefully it'll come to me because
It
I
will.
went down a rat hole the moment I started talking about it. Make sure I was going to hit all the, and then I lost whatever the fuck I was. I lost your first topic, but you posed the first question. I said, okay, I'm going to answer that. Now I've forgotten what it was. I moved on to the second question, which is okay, why is Brazil the way it is and America the way it is? And the third question is this issue of rule of law. And so,
Wait, failure of rule of law.
right. It's important to note the difference between the failure of having rule of law and the failure of rule of law.
All right. You cannot have rule of law, and that is a failure to have the rule of law, even if the rule of law is failing in your country.
No, it's again great.
Oh, that's different. It's different than if the rule of law is failing in your country. Having the rule of law and it failing is better than not having the rule of law at all.
Correct. All right. So the difference I want to go with the Brazilians is they're taking responsibility, and Americans aren't. Now to go back to, oh shit, I need to rewind. Fucking thing.
Have some coffee.
I mean, it's like okay, I have to keep trying in my head. I'm sort of keeping this little diagram of all the prevarications you're conflating, and I'm like, okay, I can answer this. I actually can. I can answer this, and then I get it in my head, and I chase some freaking thing down a rat hole for a half second, and I come back and I'm like, what the hell? Where'd the rabbit go? You know?
Sorry, Kurt.
So anyway, so yes,
the structural problem. The structural problem.
We have a structural problem that we inherited, and we know, you and I've discussed at length why this structural problem exists. But like all sciences, right? Sciences is the progress of decreasing ambiguity between the logics we use to explain the universe around us. Well, that's the same thing for the common concurrent law, is that we identify a pattern, and then people invent a new scheme to fuck with it, and then we outlaw that, and they invent a new scheme that's even more precise to fuck with that, and this process never ends. Right? So the way you do that is you have to have some means of falsifying each market, and our market, as I argue, is that we have two substantial holes. A couple more, three in this particular venue, is that the Congress can pass a law, pass legislation that the court must treat as law. It's an important distinction.
Yes.
The court must treat as law, as passing that legislation that has not been vetted by the court for its legality. Right, so that's the problem one. Problem two: the court has no means of returning something to the Congress for clarification.
No review process.
Right, and thirdly, the population has no means of submitting. No, the population has no court that procedurally what's called the administrative court, that is essentially a relationship between the people and the Congress. In other words, we assume everything can be voted into being, and it's false. That's the big problem. That's the big fucking hole, right? Is that we assume everything can be voted in. But whereas, and the second thing is the Congress doesn't have to take cases we demand to reconcile. Does that make sense? Whereas the
Congress
court
doesn't have to take,
cases that we put before it,
right?
And
They
so-
are free to ignore the people.
right. So there's no sequence of people, administrative court, Congress. And you get around that, needing that, if you can go to the monarchy. Right? When you say the system has failed, that's why you need a monarchy, because it's a person who is above the legislation and restoration of the law. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So he can throw the government out, do whatever he wants, as long as he's restoring the law. So the problem, that's why you need a king, is not because they come up with bright ideas. It's because when things fail, you have a judge of last resort to appeal to, so you don't have to have a war. And that's really the only decision monarchies need to make. They need to be able to say, kill every fucking communist on this territory in the next 24 hours, regardless, because that's above the legislation and the restoration of the law. That's why you have to have it. And so the court, he can ask a Supreme Court and say, all you have to do is verify that what I'm doing is restoring the law. They don't have to agree with anything else. If my attempt is to restore the law, then the Supreme Court can't even outlaw the king. Right? They don't have to agree. It doesn't have to follow. It doesn't have to be legal. It doesn't have to be legislative. It just has to restore the law. That's what kings do. And so we have these holes, right? But if you have to choose between one of the countries that has no rule of law and one of those countries has some rule of law, and those have rule of law, you want a rule of law because, right? The problem is the rule of law system, which ours is pretty good, right? Is able to handle those things. The problem we've had is that what I just described isn't understood. Do you see what I mean? It's not understood as that our government is a piece of scientific engineering for the resolution of disputes and markets for people of different interests, right? Right? It doesn't understand that the law isn't preference or custom, it's science here, anyway. Right? Not legislation, but the law. Right? So these are fixable problems, but if we didn't have, this is the O. Henry ending to your question. If we didn't have that rule of law, we would never know how to make that rule of law work. In other words, we'd never just come to the point of increasing it because we do what everybody else does, which is have a fucking revolutionary war.
Double down on something.
Right. And so what the English invented with the modern state is what we call a parliament. What does parliament mean? It means parley. What is parley? It means when two fucking armies come together and they say, let's not kill each other, let's negotiate. Well, that's what parliament means. Negotiate so we don't fight. Right? Simple, right? Well, that's what we have to, that's what we need. But so we have this particular problem. And if we didn't have the rule of law, we'd never get to where we understood this was a problem, and we'd always have those civil wars. So what I'm basically saying is, you're absolutely right, Brad. These are all failures of rule of law, but they're failures of the state of our rule of law, not of rule of law. In other words,
we're in agreement. I agree with that.
Right. So now
it's failed.
Right. Now the problem is what we've uncovered in this state of failure, right? By this state of failure, this unpleasant research program. Isn't that nice how I'm
listening. I'm writing it down.
I'm positioning it very kindly. We've run this experiment, this scientific test, and it turns out, yes, we should kill all the communists. Okay. All right. But aside from that, what we've learned is, okay, our rule of law doesn't defend us against the female method of warfare.
We proved
And
it.
when that female method of warfare, we have holes in our means of resolving conflicts because in the procedures we set up in our Constitution, right? Which it then made sense, partly because the complexity of the world they lived in and whatever. But these are just, I mean, it's like, okay, I need to adjust the timing on the spark plug. I don't need to convert,
That's right.
that's the problem. So in the end, what I usually want to do, right, which is when I'm talking to you or talking to anybody else, and thankfully you're, quite a bit smarter than the average person, which in your case is a compliment, but I mean, it's not enough of a compliment.
It should be a barely compliment. It should be a real compliment.
But it's if there's no qualification there, it's not enough of a compliment, right? So you're not smarter than the average person. I can have this discussion with you, and we can make sure this happens. So conservatives are right, but what are you going to blame? Right? What are you going to blame? Right? So my attitude is they're women, they're Jews. How do you expect them to act?
Right. So it goes to there's a
wait a minute. And then we're these nice, paternal, optimistic Christians who focus on limits and let freedom happen in between, and we think it'll work out because we are generally that kind of people, because we're optimistic and we're letting people learn on their own because we want to teach them sovereignty and duty and responsibility. So we give people all these freedoms so they can learn to do the right thing. But sometimes we're like, whoops, we didn't plug that hole very well. We have to go plug the hole.
Because they prefer not to learn.
They prefer not to learn. Well, I mean,
and given the opportunity, they will weasel out every time. If they get the opportunity. And it's like the thief will thieve be given the opportunity. And so it's our job to, the Germans say Gelegenheit macht Dieben, which is leaving things around makes people into thieves. So don't do it. So we got to stop leaving opportunities for people to steal from us, from our sovereignty.
Right, but the answer is so here's the thing. So let's clarify. I know how to plug those holes. You and I just discussed most of them, right? We discussed them. What's surprising is there aren't that many.
It's truly surprising. I want to say some things. So the United States is a failed state. Europe appears to be a failed state. Okay. So in their failure, they are attempting to conquer the rest of the world with their failure.
Okay, that's the second topic, right?
Yes. Okay,
right.
that's okay. I'm writing it down as topic 2.
That's the second topic. So I want to that's very close to the thing I forgot that I wanted to talk about. All right, write down.
I'm writing it.
Write down that, and then write down priests, intellectuals, and warriors.
Yes.
All right. And then all of a sudden, this whole thing will become very, very clear because you got the 4 dimensions right there.
All right.
All right. So shit. I almost did it again. I went down that rat hole and forgot this one.
That was fast.
All right. So we're talking about. So you're back to yes, they are doing that, right?
Wait,
yes.
Topic 2.
No. Yes, I want to confirm it so I can move back. So yes, topic 2 is occurring.
Okay.
But topic 2 occurring because of what topic 1 is.
Because of a failed state.
And why is a failed state?
Failed state is because of
errors
in the rule of law, which failed to account for all kind of misbehaviors.
Yeah, with the female, we'll explain why in a second. They failed to account for the female method of warfare.
Yes.
Right, which is intellectually produced by the Jews, practiced by basically women and the unfed. And so that vulnerability would not be exposed as a problem to be cured by rule of law, which is what I do, unless we had rule of law.
We're not in argument. That was good. That was good. But it's like I want the audience to be aware of something, and that Kurt will learn tangentially by virtue of contact, which is, you know how hard it is to cause him to say these important things. How much pressure I have to put up with. It's just crushing. It's crushing. All right.
Well, I keep telling you and the audience knows this because I'm very complimentary to you.
You're very kind.
It's actually really hard for me to understand normal people. So what I think is obvious, right?
Right. It's just so not.
It's just, that's why I call myself an idiot, right? That's why I'm an idiot, is because I can't imagine,
right,
not seeing the patterns in the world, right? And it makes me an idiot about the things that people who don't see patterns in the world see the world as, right? And so I'm stupid, and that's why I call myself an idiot. And you laugh at me, and the audience laughs, but it's my self-deprecating sense reason.
That's right. That's right.
So that was
we have the rule of law, and we exist in a failed state by virtue of the failures of the rule of law to protect ourselves from depredations of people
right. But this is a great question. How do we know what fails?
It has to fail.
It has to fail. Oh, right? God. I mean, that's the whole thing.
Yeah, but this is like a whole systemic failure. It's like failing on so many levels at the same time.
Right, but I mean, there's a relationship between your problem, what was originally problem 1, but we've now talked about as problem 2.
Yes.
Which is, and I don't want to go there yet, right?
Okay.
I want to build the momentum. But you can't get there except by failure, right? Right. That the problem is you don't know about a failure until a failure. You don't know.
Oh, I see. I see. So this is like this goes to Hegelian synthesis, thesis, antithesis, synthesis.
Well, I try to avoid Hegel at all costs, and he's one of those people. If I could go back in history and kill somebody, he's on the list.
He's on the short list.
He's on the short list.
It's like the failure drives the antithesis. The failure drives the synthesis. It comes out of the conflict arising between the failure and the resolution of the failure.
Okay, so now can I science that?
Please do.
Is that a problem theory test? We only act on problems, right? So an opportunity. So you have to have a problem before you have to be aware of the problem, conscious of a problem. Well, in our case, what does a problem mean? It means conflict. So you have to encounter a conflict because you can't anticipate them. Why? Because the physical world may be mathematical and somewhat infinitely predictable, but the behavioral world is computational, and so it's not infinitely predictable. It's only limitedly reducible. So we can't predict the way that people are going to come up with to fuck with the law.
The crooked mechanism by which they're going to circumvent the law
is completely unpredictable.
Because lying is so much more creative than telling the truth.
It's because it's bound by fewer constraints, right? Right? You know what I mean? It's
more degrees of freedom.
You have more degrees of freedom, so you have more degrees of permutation, right? So whereas truth or parsimony, we said, what's testifiable, has very few degrees of freedom. We've actually talked about that there's only 8 degrees of freedom, and they're all coherence tests them against each other.
Okay. So wait, go back to problem theory test.
So this is Popper, right? So all epistemology follows the same which is a problem. You auto-associate to come up with a hypothesis. You you test by reason, and then if it survives reason, now you have a theory. You test theory by practice, in other words, doing something, action. So it's auto-association, reason, action, and then you have markets, right? Which is how you get a law. It survives in the market. well, we don't have a great word for theory versus, we use theory or we use working theory versus accepted theory, right? But that we really need a word for, and then we have law, which really means it's been mathematically reducible. So we don't have a word there.
Right. What's the scientific theory is like accepted?
Right, we don't have a word for accepted theory. We have theory, which means it exists but it's not accepted, and we have a working theory which we aren't sure about. We have an accepted theory, which means there's consensus on it, and then we have a law, which means it's mathematically reducible.
All right. But there's an interesting, because there's a
But can I just say something?
it goes to the conflict, because this makes a perfect loop, because you have a law, you go theory, working theory, accepted theory, to a law, to a conflict. It goes back to the theoretization again.
Correct. So that's why, just like we say, well, the Earth runs around the sun. Well, that's not really quite true. The sun is traveling through the galaxy, and it's in a spiral, right? And time's passing along the spiral. Well, knowledge works the same way. The difference is both things are happening. They're both following some attractor, and and I'm trying to make an analogy here to make a visualization. But I mean, there is one most parsimonious logic of the universe, and we've done most of the work on it at this point. It's not mathematically reducible yet, but it's logically reducible. It's causally reducible, which means it's operationally reducible. So we know all the operational construction of the universe now, and it's kind of fascinating to me. Went over it with somebody yesterday. It took me about 15 minutes, and that person was like head exploding, but vaguely followed, right? And you can do it in 15 minutes if you have the requisite knowledge, right? But it's the same thing as it's gonna be so shit. I don't want to go rat-hole. I'm gonna hand it back to you.
Theory, law, conflict, theory.
Right. It's what Popper said. It was problem theory test, problem theory test, problem theory test, problem theory test, problem theory test. And what you're doing, of course, is you're attempting to narrow it. Now, some things end up completely broken, and some things end up surviving, and some things, three things that fail, right, end up helping you identify the convergence of those three failures as a victory, which is what you're really looking for in science, is some sort of triangulation between three things you don't understand that help you guide to the pattern that you're trying to identify. So, I mean, basically our system, our civilization is scientific, right? It's purely empirical. That's what rule of law means. It's the accumulation of empirical evidence, the resolution of differences, combined with the theories of cooperation that can result from legislation. So it's positiva, theory, and legislation, and negativa, law, discovered by dispute resolution. So, and so the problem, I'm waiting for you to say something, because you look like you want to say something.
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
This problem theory test is trifunctional.
Correct.
And it's like, I'm trying to relate it to the trifunctional nature of the three coercions,
Problem, theory, test, demand, theory, limits. Supply. Demand, supply, limits, right? So.
All right, sorry.
Well, I mean, you just said something. You're teasing me earlier about saying something really profound, and you just said something really profound. I kind of like to dwell on it for a second.
All right.
You said problem theory test is trifunctional too. Everything's trifunctional. Why? Because it has to be. Can only have a divergence.
That's right.
The potential for capturing energy or the potential for losing energy. Right, and the more energy we put under the curve, the more. So how do you do that? You identify a demand problem, you theorize a supply, right? Theorize a supply, and you either supply it or provide a limit. Just as problem theory test. And tests generally falsify, right? Which is what. So it's just, I think you did a beautiful thing there. I'm not trying to think if we have that. I'm pretty sure it's not in there. I'm pretty sure if I go to the epistemology section, we don't have it represented.
Right, so what is happening is that I'm going back to the failed state.
Okay.
Is that the demand for solutions from the crooked side have exceeded the limits of the supply side.
Correct.
And now they're being tested.
Yep.
And two, we have to come up with a new synthesis that allows us to resolve this conflict.
Right, and they're using the female method of undermining to create an obstruction, which is creating disharmony that's preventing us from using the means available to us, the court and the Congress, to resolve this conflict. And because we're foolish and listen to the fucking French, we don't have a king. We had a king.
Just call them the Algerians now, please.
Please, yeah, the French Algerians. That's great.
No, the Algerians.
Algerian.
North Algerians.
Oh, I see. The French are the North Algerians. That's so true. But we taught this French feminine bullshit that we can all live in equality and fraternity and whatever, but that only exists under Mom's authoritarianism. So, if we go out there and say, okay, well, we're stuck with this problem not having a judge of last resort, what we really do is we count on the court to be our judge of last resort, but we don't have standings in administrative. In other words, there's no standing by which the court can force the legislature to do something. Force is the wrong word. All right, submit something to the legislature for resolution, or it goes through. I mean, it's just like the same thing as the Congress and laws and the president, right? I mean, the president theoretically has to sign or veto a bill, but if he doesn't act on it, it ascends. Right? Well, the court can do the same thing to the Congress. We're going to recommend this resolution to this thing if it's recommendable under law, right? Or say it's not recommendable under law, so it's not decidable. So it's a statement that has to be adjudicated by the Congress. The Congress has to solve this in a timely fashion. Right.
So what we have an impasse right now, which is why the state has failed, because there's no successful resolution of the polarization. It's increasing polarization without resolution.
Right, which means we have to have a civil war. This has been my complaint all along. I want to stop this, which is what I want to do with our work, because I want at least my statement was let's threaten a civil war so that we can solve this before we get worse. Right, was my original premise. Right, here's what we need to do it. Here's what I got to produce to make it happen. Let's show up, threaten a civil war, not because we want to have one, because we don't want to have one. Right? But if that's not going to happen, when that civil war happens, I want to be able to show up, with our guys and a bunch of documents and saying, this is our demands. Because when you notice when there's a January 6th, like I said, I didn't go because who was in charge, right? That's the real reason. If I'd have gone and I'd have gotten into the Congress and stood on the podium like I planned to, and read our demands, which are basically free speech, so that we could have the discussion. In other words, I was making free speech plus political affiliation is now genetic, and therefore, as such, is invariant, and as such, it needs to be equal protection as our sex and religion. So, my view is that if we had that, we could have a rational set of demands, but we would hold the moral high ground because all we were asking was for a rational set of demands in order to have the discussion, right? But they didn't do that, so they got cast as a rebellion. And I'm like, I can't be the only guy not stupid enough to figure out how you should do this, right? But apparently that's the case. So January 6th ended up being a tool to use against them rather than what the people who went there considered it to be was a fight.
That's because they lie about it.
Well, but to the other end of the enemy thinks that they're good, which is our subject number 2. We're going to have to get to.
See, that was perfect segue. We're in subject.
You know what I love is that you have all this knowledge now, and I can talk to you, at a peer level, and and that makes it possible to educate the audience, right? But the problem I've had in the past is, who the fuck can I talk to? You can't talk to anybody. It's like, I tell people,
Very irritating, I'm sure. It's lonely at the top of the mountain.
well, it's sort of like talking about art. Like, I went to art and I studied art theory, right? I have a classical art education and theory of art as part of the great part of civilization. But they systematically destroyed that as one of our institutions of cultural production on purpose. They did it on, the communists did it on purpose, and they were Jews, and they did it on purpose. All right, so fine. All right, I'm just watching you blink there because I knew, can I get that face out of him this time if I bring up the Jews again? But the Jews did it on purpose because they're communists. Anyway, so
that logically is not quite true, but
I know, but I'm just trying to get the fucking reaction out of you, so I can have a little joy.
No, it's like, I'm gonna have a little coffee while you enjoy yourself for a moment.
Of course, I know. I in my head, I have Martin playing in the back of my head, just smiling whenever I say that stuff, because it's really that wing of the audience is always likes to hear that. Right. So anyway, so they started on purpose. But you know how you can't. When I was in college, you could still have a conversation about art with some people, and you can't even have that today, because the politicization of art has become so thorough that you can talk to craftsmen about it, right? And it's somewhat like literature today. Literature is not as far destroyed as art has been. So if you want to talk about literature today, the politicization of literature, which is basically war against the institutions of Western culture, the same way the attack on art is war against Western culture. This thing has been politicized. And of course, they've been politicizing our movies aggressively since Obama took office. So all this politicization is just working through destroying our institutions of culture production, basically destroying our values, our ability to appeal to the excellences of history for the legitimation of our values. I think that's what's happening. Destroying our history.
Right. Yeah. So by evidence of the past.
Right. Because past is, especially for conservatives, the past is how you legitimize. The same way among the feminine, concurrency of emotions. If you haven't seen Pearl, the guys, the audience, you haven't watched Pearl, and I can't remember the other woman's name. There are two women who are emerging underneath the. Okay, Camille Paglia is really the top of the pyramid in understanding the difference between feminism, European feminism, and Jewish hostile feminism, right? Positive feminism, negative feminism. And so she's like the top of our pyramid. Underneath there are two women online, and one is Pearl, she's got red hair, and the other one's name I will find and put in the comments here, auburn hair. And I'm watching these two girls become public intellectuals the same way What If Falsification.
Oh, I know who this Pearl is. Yeah, she's quite excellent.
And I'm watching these girls through craftsmanship, which is very interesting. Not through education, but through craftsmanship. In other words, practice. Develop skills in sex differences. Now, what I noticed so I want to recommend them. I'll put their names in there. So if you want to watch them, Pearl tends to interview women.
Yes.
And the niche that the other woman is in, I just can't bring it up right now.
And you write both of their names in the notes for the audience, please.
She's taking on the man's perspective, explaining how men view things.
Oh, I know who it is.
Yeah,
I watch her too.
So these two women are doing a fabulous job becoming the generation of public intellectuals that are going to first emerge from the internet. The first emergent generation of public intellectuals from the craft, practicing the craft on the internet. Right? And there's actually a couple more. I don't know them, so I can't. I usually get frustrated, but Pearl knows her data,
Yes.
and this other woman knows the male mind.
Yeah.
And so you can pretty much get in. What I love about both of them is like, no, men are simple. They're simple, they're logical.
It's like
Pearl's
a dog.
what?
It's like a dog.
Right. So we have a problem is that our logic is what's called consistency or coherence. Consistency, correspondence, and coherence. Right? But the feminine mind sees consistency as emotional state.
It's emotional, not logical.
Right. And consistency as finding others who share this, and coherence as what you called social proof or social construction.
Yep.
You put in. I loved our conversation yesterday. Anybody who hasn't seen that, but you can't have seen it because it's in the press.
Yeah.
It's uploading now. I'm 7 episodes behind. This will be 8. And so what they see as coherence is social proof or social construction. So it's all about who agrees with whether I think something is desirable or not. Not whether something is consistent, correspondent, and coherent with reality or not. And possible or not, for that matter. No, that's the truth.
That was good. That was so particularly rude. I want to raise a glass because damn, that was good.
The ability of women to think they're special, right? It's the classical example is 80%
So non-correspondence is okay.
right, because I'm special, right? Because that's how they think about it. They don't, and so or I'm different. No, the whole point is women are less different than
men. You want to know how it will be said? Because I can hear one particular woman telling it to me now. Not all X are like that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I'll hear.
And then I should add, I'm not like that. So it's like,
especially me.
I'm not like that. Not all X are like that, and all X are like that, right? I mean, you just take. I gotta add. Now I've got a triangle, so now I can write. I'm not like that. Oh, not all X are like that, and all X are like that. That's sort of like the new sequence. We'll have to, which is all this attempt to deny reality by all 3 of those mentions. It's basically I'm special. I don't want to be bound by general rules.
Special cases.
I'm a special case. So there's like girls, they're like online. What's the metric? 80% of women find only 80% of men unattractive, right? Only 20% of men are attractive, and so but of those that are attractive, they only want 0.5% of them, right? They actually want so. And I said, what the girl is a 5. I mean a hard 5, meaning.
I was just watching Pearl talking about this.
Right. Let me finish. If the girl, the hard 5, thinks she can still get the guy,
no,
like,
Pearl was
you
talking.
You can't even imagine what he thinks of you, Darren.
Pearl's like this. Pearl's like, no, she does. She knows that she's hitting above her weight. She's just hitting.
Yes.
She wants to hit it anyway, just because she's just being rude now.
And it's just, what's funny is, my wife, Alora, Pearl's like 5'11". She's huge, right? She's just a big girl, right? And so my wife is of the same gene pool. My wife, Alora, same gene. Red hair, very light skin, athletic, right? And of course she's rail thin compared to, whenever I see Pearl, I think of that scene where in Game of Thrones, where what's his name? The guy with the big red beard talks about the gigantic woman as, do you imagine what kind of children he would have?
Raise it,
right?
Race of giants.
And I think of Pearl's like, I think when she says she doesn't think herself as unattractive, depends on what you're thinking. Because to me, you're really attractive because you're Superman. right? I mean, so it depends on what you would want. Um,
Valkyrie.
like you could get a rational
That's
a
right.
rational woman who can create, who will birth gigantic sons for you. You're like, okay. So anyway, I'm sorry, I threw you off. You were going to say, I was trying to make my point that the magical thinking is partly useful because it allows women to try to capture genes, right?
Yes.
That they
Like
can't
what?
get otherwise. Genes they might be able to snitch, but they can't own, right? Right. So I mean, I don't know. Once you realize that that's how they think, you realize why we're compatible. Think is a really not the fact that they speak that language.
They process information is
Right.
not the same as
Think is
thinking in
thinking.
the way you understand thinking, sir. Oh,
You know what's funny
my
is if I
word.
have this conversation in a room of 10 women, they'll go post-law me. If I have this conversation with one woman at a time, they always agree with me. Why? Because their motivation is actually to not look bad.
No, that's right. I cannot be seen. I cannot be seen to be that special among these women because it's going against the social proof.
It's just
You're being a bad woman because all X are like that.
Right. So it's this whole denial of the enlightenment promise of man turns out to be bullshit, right? And then the progressive view of man is like doubling down. And so there's the enlightenment view of man, which is at least optimistic. And then there's the
Right.
progressive view of man, which is like a counter revolution against Darwin in order to deny Darwin. So the progressive view is like the feminine doubling down on what's already the mistake of the Enlightenment. And let's just go straight, is that enlightened vision of man didn't come out of England or Germany. It came out of those feminine, effeminate friend fucking losers. Like every bad idea ever comes out of them.
Wait, effeminate French fucking losers. EFFL.
I mean, it's like the Jews aren't inventive; they're just hyper adaptive, right? And so, but if you know,
wait, okay.
So if you could
It's
come
like
out,
there's a hyper adaptivity. It's the same as hypergamy, except in an intellectual form, in a like social form.
Sure. And so the French come up with every bad idea because they're where they're trying. I mean, that's what's really happening, right? It's trying to Frenchify men, which is to make them all manginas, right? Because that's what French men are, pussies. So you're there. They're just that's the end result of the pussification of Western man is the French man with a lisp. So if you have you say this, but it's not. It's like common knowledge there, right? I mean, they think it's a superiority trait. It's like y'all got to travel the world more and ask hard questions. You know, not like, isn't the Eiffel Tower beautiful? Like, why are your men kind of faggy? You know, and I'll tell you.
Oh my!
I'm gonna pass out.
Right. Sorry, Kurt. It's been a hard conversation. We've only been going for 1 hour, man. We haven't even broached on topic number 2 yet.
Let's try to figure out if we had. Oh, I know what it was. I got one more point here. Well, my point is that what I'm learning from watching Pearl, right? Because she's talking to a class of women I never talked to.
That's right.
There's nothing that you can talk to them about. Right? But they're minimum variation from type. Right. So I'm listening. One thing I'm learning from her is how desperate women really are for the ability to explain how they think. In other words, we have forced women. Feminists have been saying this badly, which is what women generally do. So see, I had that other one there, and I'm like, I can make Brad wince. Watch this.
Watch this. That was easy. It wasn't even like work.
But so the problem is that women are right to object that the male method of education, what we teach each other, is contrary to their instincts and is confusing for them. Right. And the feminists have been appealing for a female frame. The problem is the women want that to be the dominant frame.
Or the only frame.
Which is the same thing. Whereas the man also want reason to be the dominant frame mostly. This isn't really true. Men only wanted the dominant frame in politics. We don't actually care if women are crazy because we just ignore it. Right? I mean, it was that great clip that woman had.
We expect that.
Yeah, we just expect them to be nuts, right? But it doesn't matter when they're socially nuts. It only matters when they're in our territory, which is that's our reproductive strategy, is politics, right? So they're messing with. I said, you don't want me in your vagina. Stay out of my politics, because it's the same thing. Your vagina is your reproductive strategy, but our political system is the male reproductive strategy. You personalize it, but we politicize it because we achieve our reproductive ends. When you look, I tried to say this to a woman the other day, and it was really interesting to watch her think it through, feel it through. They don't think it through. I said, you know how you feel like at Christmas if you can actually get all your kids in this house together? Is what you feel is that wealth, and you probably don't think of it as wealth. But what your body is perceiving it is wealth. When men look out at a population of women they don't have any relationship with, that's what we see, like you see with your kids. Because that's our wealth. So you're an individual with offspring, and we're a band of brothers with a pool of women. Right. And so we feel that same way. So imagine when I threaten your ability to control your children, the way when you threaten my ability to control my polity. It's the same behavior. And it took a while, but
so it's like what took a while?
It took her a while, but she's smart lady.
To close the synapses.
Right. Well, you just had to play it through. It's like, that makes sort of sense to me. Because it's like when I always laugh at one of the reasons I love being in Russia, right? Especially in St. Petersburg. Moscow's another thing, but I got a thing for St. Petersburg, right? These fucking trains of supermodels walk by. They're not supermodels. They're fucking ordinary Russian college girls, right? They just walk by on you're outside. It's right. Summers are that far north, right? You're outside on a Friday night with your friends, and I'm there with my wife, for Christ's sake, and my, it's two couples. And I'm like just watching this fucking parade go by. And he's like, well, yeah, I grew up here. It's normal, but Russian women are beautiful. He just takes it for granted. But I'm like, yeah. But to me, I felt the wealth, not because I could get one, because my instincts tell me the opportunity is there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. And so that's just animal computation going on in the background. So I'm like, that's how. So when I sit in a cafe and I say, I'm thinking of Veronica Cafe in Lviv, and the street name is, one of those Russian ones. It's not Sagadash. Can't remember the name. Anyways, Veronica Cafe. It's on the boulevard, right in Lviv, right heading it. We're just a 1,000 feet from the first church there. So I'm just sitting there, and I love this little run, and they have amazing coffee and teas and breads and pastries and food and whatever. And so I'd go there, spend the whole fucking day there, sitting in a chair, and it's basically the wall, the window, table and chairs, and then this little fence, and it's all got flowers around it. Okay, I'm looking at the flowers, I'm looking at the women walk by. What's the fucking difference? There isn't any. It's just beauty, right? Now, I don't know what women see when they look like that, but for me as a guy, it's like, you know, it might as well be laying in a pile of money. I mean, it's equivalent for me, you know, or her having an infinite black American Express card inside of Dolce, you know, I don't know, Dolce Gabbana.
Right.
Same deal. The difference is for men, it's political, and if you can get that across to women, they begin to understand it. So what I'm seeing is, I've been working very hard on giving us this unambiguous language of politics, but I have been undervaluing the disambiguation we're doing of the masculine feminine as providing women a rational is the wrong word.
A feeling.
Well, you can explain, it is possible to explain what women do logically. You know, a logical method for expressing their version of identity, consistency, correspondence, and coherence. And I think that's something that women desperately need, just as we've added them to the polity, but they don't have a means of communicating without sounding like liars. You know what I mean? Or crazy. It might be possible to give women the vocabulary, or just like we've given the vocabulary to any other science. Give women the vocabulary that expresses the logic of the female experience. So just as you and I have done with lying, right? Here's how men lie, here's how women lie. Well, it's also here's how men value it. Well, we can take these concepts, this consistency, coherence, whatever, and we can put them out as you and I thinking of men as correspondence with reality, which is statistically, basically what happens to a tribe in its environment. Whereas they can say, what happens to me and my children in this environment? And we can probably put the positiva equivalent of the way lying. In other words, I've done a lot of this already. We can put the positiva equivalent of how thoughts are processes.
Yeah.
Together for women, so they have a vocabulary of, because it's the same thing. They're still saying, I want identity, consistency, correspondence, and coherence. They're saying the same thing. The thing is, what they're judging is the absence of conflict among peers, and what we're judging is the absence of conflict with reality. Now, you laugh, but I was serious when I say women don't grasp. Women only grasp wants; they don't grasp possibility.
Yeah.
Right? So this is the problem: is when we see an impossibility, it goes off the table of wants. It's the same way when we listen to women. If we don't see a problem, it doesn't exist. Or this woman I told you, Pearl, and the other one, she has a red background. I can't remember her name.
I know who it is.
And she says a great one. She says, if a man isn't looking at you when you give him a specific thing to remember, he's not going to remember it. And so, which is my wife would do. Look at me. She's amazing. Laura's amazing, really. Kurt, look at me.
My, hey.
I'm just an extreme version of the male, right? I mean, so.
I'm looking for this. There, I see Sarah Dawn Moore.
That's right, Sarah Dawn Moore. And about a month ago, she sort of figured out her
niche.
Just about a month ago, and started talking about it. And she's doing it for entertainment, and now she's like, okay, I can do good with this. I can. And I'm like, well, you just
so the craft is coming into focus,
right? So she practiced the craft until she became a master of the craft. And once you're a master of the craft, now you can apply it, right? I mean, you can generalize it to broader context. So I was just really thrilled And I just sent her a little note of congratulations on conversion from a craftsman to a Republican election. Right, and thank you for your work. The problem is just these women, they get like, they
A
don't know,
million.
they get a million things, so you don't have any idea if they ever see it or not, but makes me feel good to compliment, even if the compliment doesn't get ever read. So you never know. It's always weird when you do comment, like, oh, I love you guys, you're wonderful, when they respond. Because it's like you have to keep things in one sentence, right?
Right.
Anyway, all right, so that was topic one. That took an hour and 23 minutes. All right.
I have to say something to the audience before we do go any further. It's hard to come up with topics that are interesting and engaging. It's just, and it's interesting to come up with ones, even the controversial ones. The other name is Just Pearly Things.
Yeah.
Okay, now that was for the audience. Now I'm done with that sidebar. Now we're to topic two.
Well, along those lines, though, you say it's but like yesterday when you came out with what I thought was perfect, you asked a question of what's the relationship between solipsism,
social proof, and
censorship,
yeah,
and secession. And I was like, I liked social construction, and I wanted to add social construction to it because I noticed when I was talking to somebody else, I said,
yeah, it fits in.
Social construction, social proof. And so I love that because normally what I have to do is go weave. Somebody asked me a question. Well, the serialize, disambiguate, enumerate, serialize, enumerate, serialize, operationalize, and disambiguate, right? And so when you did that, it's like, okay, I have a whole arc I can cover. And so it didn't, it was like I didn't, and you started with the anchor points. So I didn't have to do all this fucking work to say, you got to come back up and look at this from farther away to understand the whole concept. So that's what happens usually. Somebody asks me a point question. I'm like, well, I can't answer that without putting it in this context. And I can't answer that without putting it in this context. And I can't answer that without putting it in this context. So the work I have to explain to get down there is just, so, but when you do something like that, it provides a beautiful arc from causality, solipsism, all the way up to political consequence. You covered the whole fucking spectrum from the individual to the group to the oppositional group to the resulting political problem. And I just thought that was beautiful. Or today, you start out with this question, which was kind of fun. And I'm like, okay, I know he's talking about, I know there's something under here. I got to figure it out somehow. It's under there somewhere. And I can see three basic questions that we answered. So let's go, we answered two of them already. Let's answer the top, what we call topic two.
Topic two is which is the failed state is attempting to project force to coerce not failed states to also fail in a similar fashion.
Okay. Well, that's actually three. Let's go back to two. Let's go back to two, which is actually one. And then we called one is actually two, and that's three.
Okay, all right, that's confusing.
Go back to
drink some coffee.
Let's go back to
I'm out of coffee. Oh my Lord.
We may have to pause.
That might be good. It might be good to just to catch our breath a little bit.
Your question was. Your question was.
And then I would try to understand this 1, 2, 3 problem set again, because that.
Your question started out as the WF control this universe and whatever, and I'm going to so I said, well, remember priests, public intellectuals, and warriors for me, so that I can have
I've got it written down.
All right, and so then you said, well, why is Brazil doing it and what it's not. And I'm like, well, we got choice of rule of law or not rule of law, right? Right, and then.
Okay.
Now you want me to go to what do we, the next piece, which is however you just phrased it, which is this broader question of basically what to do about it. I'm like, let's go back to the first one so we get a.
Okay, let's just, for the audience, just to make it easier, just so we're concise.
Okay.
Okay, so what's topic 1, Kurt?
Why do non-state actors emerge as drivers of state action?
Okay.
That's number one, because that's what you're arguing for, is that we're and remind me to say how that relates to the problem of democracy.
Okay.
And how democracy, and excuse me, democracy and the scale of the democracy.
Okay.
So
all right,
that's the first one. The second one is why is it that Brazilians are having their reaction, we having ours?
right.
And that led to the problem of our rule of law being, well, you have to encounter the problem and that
Yep.
there's holes in our system, but we wouldn't have seen these holes unless we had this problem.
Yeah.
So, right. And so now we have to fix the problem. And so I think your last question is, how do we fix the problem? Which I think I've answered that question already.
Yeah, that's, yep.
Right.
Topic 4.
So those are, I mean, you asked underneath in other words, you had a beautiful thing set up there, set of questions. I just had to turn it into
Yeah.
I had to turn it from conservative rage.
It's not rage, but outrage. So close.
Conservative. It's like rage is when you're past the point. Rage is when you're into anger, when you're into action.
When you're doing it.
You're doing. Outrage is the preparation.
You're doing stomping around in war drums, man.
All righty. Well, give me
Let's
one.
get some coffee then.
I'm going to pause this and I'm going to go to fresh coffee. You handsome devil.
Oh my goodness. Silly man.
Oh.
I said, I better talk to Kurt and write. See, I wrote notes down since we broke. I said, you wanted to make note of the internet and its utility in bringing craftsmanship back.
Yeah, I don't make enough of this. In other words, it's something I'd like to, if in a perfect world, if I had more time, I would like to work on promoting this particular issue, which is that if I go through the people I think are the best teachers.
Yeah.
Understand, a researcher and a teacher are two different things.
Yeah.
I consider my peers researchers. If I want to listen to Joshua Bach and my group of super nerds, right, then we're talking the same language, but we're not very good teachers generally. And so, but what I've noticed is that the internet has restored the ability of people to practice a craft and demonstrate competency without credentials. And I think that's the most interesting phenomena that's presently happening. So if you try to get the information you get from the two women, Pearl and Sarah.
Yeah, more.
Right? Or the information that you're getting from the guys who do the same thing. I'm actually more interested in the women because the guys are guys. Anyway, but it's just men need to understand, but women need to change. Does that make sense? Right. So I'm more interested in the women's view.
Yeah.
So what's happening? So if I look at them, or look at what if Alt Hiss, he's 21 years old. Right. I consider him a friend now. If I look at the best, what I would consider heterodox financial analyst, he's 23 years old.
Hmm.
It's Stoic Finance.
That's his handle.
Yeah, Stoic Financer.
Okay.
If I look at Economics Explained channel,
Yep.
if I look at Gods and Generals, these people are way better. You can get a better education from those. I'm sorry, I'm not giving up the rest. There's a bunch more. Or like,
Yep.
you know, I have this list. They're the ones that are top of my mind, right? I mean, if Peterson hadn't gone off the rails, he was headed in the right. He was trying to basically restore Stoicism. He just didn't realize that what he was doing, and he went the wrong direction. But he was on the road to restoring Stoicism. And so you get this group of people and these young intellectuals, and they're emerging by craftsmanship, by practicing teaching. Oh yeah, do all of them appeal to research? Absolutely. But all of them take the research and they teach with it. Like, so what we're learning here is pretty interesting. I bet I can teach the law better. Not a bet, I'm pretty positive I can. I can teach the logic of law that would prepare you for law school better than anyone. Because I'll make it sure that you can make an argument. But who's an economic? No, I always said I'm trying to. I'm back in my mind is frustrated by the fact that I've got at least 10 or 12 people on my list, and they're not coming to mind. Right. Anyway, the ones I mentioned are good enough. Is that they're not credentialed. They didn't get their skills in college. They got their skills by practicing them like a carpenter. Right? And so what I want to say is the re-emergence of competency versus credentials is a fascinating aspect of the internet I didn't predict. I was on the same prediction curve as Peterson was, because he was there fairly early, which is that, wow, I can teach way more people on the internet than I'll in at one time than I could in my whole career in a classroom, and it seems to have the same effect. Right? And so I expected what would happen was what I saw with sort of the teaching company and their recorded classes, which is that you would see professors coming out and producing. But they did. You know what? It wasn't as good as what the craftsmen produced. Now, this is partly due to the professorial model of teaching, which is versus the presentation model, the video model of teaching, which is in the past, professors couldn't afford the production quality that we can put into video. We don't think of it that way, but think of a textbook as the past version of high production quality.
Yes.
Right. But today, high production quality is like we can show you video, images, narrations, right? And we can condense information into these 10 or 25-minute sections that aren't dependent upon the class environment, your attention span, right? I mean, or they're not dependent on the institutional delivery of a thing live in sequence. And so, I expected things to come about like, how many guys want to be able to make a knife, right? I don't know.
Right.
It's like a spiritual thing for guys.
Right.
I mean, who knows, right? Make me a knife, right? It's like there's something primitive, pre-Neanderthal in making, chipping away at a rock to make a weapon. Right? So how many guys are out there teaching how to make? No, I mean, I knew that would happen, right? One of the things I was very interested in is, after I got to college, was the stonemasonry, because I'd studied sculpture, and at that point there were a bunch of sculptors working with raw stone to build sculptures. I studied a little stonemasonry. And do you know how hard it was to learn stonemasonry back in the 80s versus
Oh my,
today?
oh my.
I mean, you could, or for example, how many guys show you how to make swords today? You know, I have that fucking first edition copy of the history of swords by whatever his name is somewhere, right? You know, it's a library version. It's been tattered, right? It's got
Yep.
scribbling in it, right? But I mean, that was about all there was. His name is Oakfield or something like that, right?
Huh.
Um, and so back then, I wanted to learn how swords were made, right? Because I was in the part of history of art, right? So I read that. Well, now there's like 600 guys who are master craftsmen,
Yeah.
you know, making it out of every kind of metal combination, curvature, temperature, you know, and explaining to you the chemistry behind the
Right.
bonds and, you know, how you, I mean, Jesus, I mean, you couldn't know that stuff. I mean, I remember talking to my first, here I go again, my first wife's father, my first father-in-law. I got a bunch of them now.
Collecting.
I got a collection of father-in-law. Because he's a metallurgist, right? He's an engineer, metallurgical engineer. You know, and they got to do a lot of math in the past, right? What do they do today? You know, you punch the stuff in a computer and it all. It's like, you know, it comes out, right? But I mean, they have to know, like, if I add this many grams of
That's right.
art or this many at this
Right.
temperature, when it's traveling from the furnace to this pour at this and this temperature and this humidity over that, right? I mean, they know all that shit, right? Right? You can get the same shit from watching some guy doing it.
Right.
He's
He's turning a bicycle chain into a special Damascus blade steel implement for his knife.
Well, it's the same thing for economics. Like, I'm a big fan of economics explained. They've branched out now, but they do fundamentals and the whole thing. And I've complimented a couple times on just the brilliance of how they tell you what you want to hear and then show you what the world really is, but you don't feel like you were stupid, right? I mean, the way they figured out how to deliver, the fact that all economics is counterintuitive, right?
Yes.
And that even the presentation, the production quality, the examples they use, whatever. Now, I remember studying economics in college. I swear to God, I used to want to hit the professor. He was so bad. I mean, I was like, I can't believe you're here. And he also talked like this, you know. It was like just,
Oh
it was
my.
just like the worst combination of things. I'm like, I think I dropped out after the second week because I'm like, I could read the book. And I just went and read the book. I don't think I read that book. I read all the other ones too. Right? I mean, you just read, okay, economics is really easy. It's just,
Oh my.
so because I'd already worked in electronics, and since I'd studied electronics is hydraulic, right? I mean, you just
it made it intuitively obvious.
so economics became intuitively obvious because it's basically hydraulics. So, you know, if you want to understand the hydraulic processes, right? I mean, then
All you have to do is convert it into hydraulics and you're good.
It's the same fucking thing. It's economics, just hydraulics. And it's like, okay, you push down here. Yeah, that's great, but it's going to come over there. It doesn't go nowhere, right? It's when they say quantum mechanics is mysterious. It's not. It has nowhere to enter. The energy has nowhere to dissipate. It's the same thing as hydraulics, right? It's got to go somewhere. Now, when you and I like boil water, it goes to the atmosphere, right? But the quantum background, it's got to have a place to go, because anyway. So the economics is like, oh, it's hydraulics, you know, man. I'd been sitting with my little Radio Shack kits and my soldering iron and my voltmeter, trying to build primitive computer circuits, right? Back when you could do that kind of thing.
Right.
They sold you individual resistors.
55 circuit.
And when you got an IC chip, that was like, wow, right? I get to work with advanced tech. I feel like an idiot now, but at the time it was like, wow, this is really cool. Do you know how many times I melted the IC chip because I did the soldering wrong?
Oops.
And I was close. I blew that one wrong. So, but once you understand how it's just like, okay, it's going that way, and that's going to resist. It's just hydraulics, right? And it's the same thing with the economy. It's like, okay, well, if this is going to go here, where's the rest of it going to go? Right? It's just obvious. You know, you push down here, it's going to pull up there. Oh, wait, I'm going to get ahead. Well, that just means it's like everybody says, we should conserve gasoline. Why? So you can make it cheaper to drive in China? I mean, because that's all you're doing. You're not going to conserve gasoline. You're just going to transfer the consumption somewhere else.
We're going down too many rabbit holes, man. We got to stop. Because see, you made me spark on the fact that the Swiss are not going to allow people to charge their electric cars. I want to ask my liberal friends. I want to my neighbor across the street, right? The proud liberal. He drives a Tesla. He offered me a ride in his Tesla, and now I want to take him up on it and ask him how proud he is to have a Tesla. Now that Elon's torpedoing the Twitter nonsense, it's just funny. Sorry, that was detours. We have to get back on topic.
They are amazing.
Yes. Yes. Now we have to. We are back on topic, sir.
Thank you.
We wrote our topics down.
I can run on that hydraulic, economic. You know,
I know.
I can just go on that for a couple of hours, no problem. Thank you for
yeah, I know.
For reining me in.
Reel it in a little bit. Okay. So we are on. We did topic 3, and we did topic 4. Right? The failed state of the U.S., topic 3, and then how to fix topic 4. So now we will do topic 2, why Brazil reaction and no U.S. reaction.
Well, we did that. I just wasn't clear.
Oh, we did that one. So then we're to topic 1, which is why do non-state actors drive state action?
Okay.
Democracy and scale are to be considered.
Okay. Believe it or not, I'm going to plan this one out a bit.
Watch.
Okay. Yeah. How to tell this story in 15 minutes or less. Don't know. Unlikely. The rabbit holes are too attractive. Wait a minute, here's a new toy to play with. All right. All right. So you asked the question of why do our governments follow the WEF? Why is the WEF so influential with so many governments, especially in the West? Now, do you have any? Now, I know the reason I want to bait you into giving some theories is because it will help the audience who will probably agree with you anchor themselves so that I can correct everyone.
There you go. I understand. I don't. I'm the
You're the voice of the audience.
At the Greyhound track, they have a stuffed bunny. And he runs around on an electric thing. That's my
do
job.
It without me asking, right?
I'm the rabbit.
You aren't offering to. You aren't putting the rabbit out there, so I have to ask you to launch one. But if you don't want to,
so it goes like this: is the issue is this is opportunism. They have an opportunity that they are exploiting, which is they are capturing the sentimentality of the empathic people in the polity for the purpose of controlling the polity to gain influence.
Correct. So let's go back in time.
Okay.
To the time of the dinosaurs.
No, oh my.
That's too far back.
That was pretty far.
I'm subconsciously dreading this conversation for some
reason. Really? So I call these people cynical opportunists.
Well, the thing is that you're presuming they don't think they're doing right.
As opposed to presuming they think they're doing right.
I presume people idiots doing what they perceive as good in the group
Oh, so
that they
this is
obtain
good. Now
their
this is,
information from.
I see, I leave it open. I presume they may be one or the other. They must be one or the other.
Mhm.
But I leave the option open that they're cynical opportunists because that
Okay.
could be a possibility.
Well, we
Because
know some of them.
I believe they generate lies, and they know they're generating lies. And you
So,
think that they may think their lies are good or not or bad, and I don't care.
well,
I don't need that. I don't need that.
let's just state the truth. As there are cynical opportunists,
Or foolish opportunists.
there are foolish opportunists. There are practical opportunists, and there are believing there are good opportunists. Right? There are a bunch of people, and they have and that group of people, regardless of what their belief is,
Yeah.
have discover a common means of obtaining power, influence, and status. Status, power, and influence. Status,
Yes.
influence, and power.
Yes.
Correct? So
Yeah.
there's a spectrum of them that develop common interests. It's not that they're all the same. It's that, Martin is always trying to get me to, like you, there's those evil fuckers there, Doolittle, and you're always trying to write them off as NPCs. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm just trying to counter signal the belief that everybody's evil, right?
Right now,
You know what I mean?
evil is special. Not all X are evil.
Yeah, right. And so, I mean, it's just like you meet these people, and if you meet enough congressmen, not so much senators, but most congressmen are well-intentioned fools. I mean, they really are. I mean, that's the problem. They're well-intentioned fools, and then you need, if you're getting in a job as a senator, if you've been a senator for a while, you learn the craft over the course of a career, right? But if you're a freshman senator or a freshman representative, you're a fucking idiot, right? You've got to spend a year learning how government works, right? And you're only in the office for a couple of years, right? So it takes you to be reelected a few times before you see how this works, and you're a practical fool now instead of a well-meaning fool, right? Right? You're informed and practical fool. Any event. So, how did I start this out? So we have a distribution of people
Yes.
that have a common interest. Now, the question is, really the interesting question is, why did priests emerge in opposition to the state? Why did the state emerge in opposition to the priests?
The second mover.
Why did philosophers emerge in opposition to the state and the priests? Why did scientists emerge in opposition to the philosophers and the priests? What we call the businessmen, burghers, and the state. So what, right? Because an opportunity arose for them to.
Right.
And partly because the information and knowledge was available for them to make use of. So how did I sell morality in 3000 BC? Well, I sold it with a religion. How did I sell it in 500 500 BC, which is the age of transformation, through organized religion, which is scale? How did the Greeks sell it? Well, they sold it through, and the Chinese they sold it through philosophy, which is again an iterative improvement on it. Well, this process continues, right? Until we get in the Europeans, we go through the Christian version, then the philosophical rationalist version, then the empirical version. So what happened is that economics replaced morality, replaced religion as the means of decidability in government. And it became the instrument by which government operated rather than religion, the words command. So all law, all this other stuff, economics has become,
It's by scale.
right, it's what's happening is scale keeps increasing, and so does the precision of the tuning keep increasing.
Yep.
The philosophy is more precise than religion, empiricism more precise than philosophy, and science is more precise than empiricism, and economics that is only, the way we think of it, it's 150 years old. It's 180 years old. 70 years old. 18. Depends on when you start. No, I'm not going to go back to what's his name. So, Adam Smith lays it out, right? And that's when we get to say, despite the people who were before him, he's basically said in this theory of moral sentiments that cooperation is what makes morality in the context of production. And what he said in his more well-known work, is The Wealth and Poverty of Nations, is that it was the cooperation between nations that produced morality between nations, just like it was the cooperation between people that produced the morality between people. So this is the emergence of the middle class as the virtuous class to be imitated, because only the middle class has the values that are of equal benefit to everyone, whereas the upper class doesn't and the lower class don't. So that was the moral framework. That became the Enlightenment vision. Now, the French didn't like it so much because that was more judgeable. And would also have mean that people with more status in church and whatever, they were being falsified. Right? So the French came up with their bullshit, and the Germans came up with their bullshit. The Jews came up with their bullshit. The Russians came up with their bullshit. Chinese copied the Russian bullshit, and the South Americans copied the Russian bullshit, and then the Southeast Asians copied the Russian bullshit, and the Russian bullshit collapsed. And then now they're like which bullshit do we copy now? And I'm like, well, it turns out that these fucking assholes did this evil thing called capitalism, raised their people out of, it's not capitalism, it's called consumer capitalism. It's a very important difference. Consumer capitalism, which in other words, the purpose of capital is to increase consumption. And consumption is what causes prices to decrease. And when prices decrease, the primary benefits are people at the bottom. Right? So consumer capital. So it says, shit, we got to do this consumer capitalism thing. And so they course corrected. Of course, the Soviets failed almost completely. The Chinese started to succeed and then decided that they didn't like it. They wanted to hold it because what would have happened is China would have fallen apart into European countries, which is what it really needs to do, is fall apart into like European countries, into a loose federation, or like America needs to go back to a loose federation, small countries. And then the Islamic world is like, what the fuck's going on?
Wait, what?
Yeah. And the Islamic world is like, well, this communism thing is really close to Abrahamism, so we'll try that because it's bottom authoritarianism, so we'll try that. And that fucking, we sort of tried to cut them off so they couldn't even get there. That sort of worked, and they're still sort of dealing with it. But what's happening is that they're just, the internet is conquering Islam, right? More so than any policy we've put out, any policy theory, because it's raw information. Right now, Muslims are going to keep their virtue, right there.
Yes,
they're going to keep the woke, the Jewish introduction of decadence as a means of undermining social structures. So the Muslims will keep that, great. But by and large, the young version of most Muslims in the modern world, I mean, Americans were behind in perceiving that. I mean, if I talk to a modern Egyptian guy in college, he's pretty. Yeah. Like they're pretty with it, I would say they're more with it than some of our old people in the Balkans are, right? The Europeans are in the Balkans. So why? Because they're more desperate for modernity. All right. So if I painted this picture enough of that, we moved that there's always a path of opportunity being generated by new knowledge,
Right.
by non-state actors. And the problem is then integrating the knowledge into the operation of the state.
Yes.
The problem with democracies then is that because they accelerate the process by which rent seeking replaces corruption. Don't ask me to explain all that without going down that'll be a rat hole. But
Right.
Democracies are become more traditional and less empirical. Does that make sense? Democracies gravitate between a race to the bottom, which is more traditional and less empirical. And so what's happening is the people who are developing empirical ends are organizing outside the state. And the state is saying, we're not generating these ideas. Where do we get ideas from? And so the state's looking to these places. The problem is, who is the state's customer? In other words, if you're a bureaucrat working in an economy and state, are you looking at your citizens as your customer?
Right.
Are you looking at your peers as customer? Are you looking at your peers in other countries as customers? Or you're looking at the elites that your peers look up to as your customer? And it's the latter.
Yeah, it's the latter one.
So my argument was, why do you think religion evolved? It evolved for the same reason this fucking external, in other words, why did religion evolve external to the state? What's the present religion? Fucking economic prosperity on the socialist model. It's the same fucking thing. So you're seeing a world priesthood develop by the means of precision and decidabilities available, and they're trying to achieve typically priestly ends. And what do priestly ends do? They always result in bads, right? Because the priestly end locally is fantastic, but a priestly end globally is devolutionary. We know this because there's only one method of protecting yourself against devolution, and that's trifunctionalism. But trifunctionalism gives the most license to third parties to come up with ideas from anywhere on the triangle that can be then incorporated in the state. But democracy, it gradually produces the greatest resistance to the integration of those empirical changes that can be brought in, right? Because you're trying to solve the bottom of the pyramid for political power, which means you're going to the feminine side. What the reality is you want to produce the 50s, which is the space program, technical innovation, educational superiority, right? Adversarial competition with the Soviets. You want to produce the masculine version of exceptionalism, which is the lead, which as a consequence drags the lower classes behind. You don't try to maximize extractions from the present to redistribute to the lower classes, which then drags you all down, right? So these people out there, they think they're doing good because they're able to mass under democracy a lot of attention in an environment where most governments are democracies. Most governments are looking for a solution from a priesthood, and that priesthood is satisfying a priestly thing of maximizing the benefit of the minority, despite the fact that, like the priesthood of the past, over time this will result in stagnation, decline, dysgenia, and collapse. So we've got a natural system for this. And like I said, with the problem of law, you don't know that women are the problem until the women have freedom to be a problem. You don't know that our government has holes until the holes are exposed by problems. You don't know that the global system is being promoted by these people is essentially a new religion that's following the same recipe as other religion with a different set of decision criteria, but is going to produce the same ends as a religion. And what you're reacting to is it sounds like a religion to you, and that religion is destructive. Well, it's because you're right. Now, the difference is I just gave you the science of what you're right.
Why you're right.
Why I give you why you're right. And the problem for conservatives is I can't have that. I mean, that was, I don't know how long that took me.
It took about 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Okay. I did okay. Right. So it took about 15 minutes. How do I make conservatives understand what I just said in enough numbers to be able to say, oh, I get it.
I think we just do with this. We're just gonna start a show like Pearl's show, and just start gaining competency and have little chats with some conservatives, and they'll get it.
You know, I wonder, you know, you hit on a couple of smart ideas here that I want to toy with. It takes me 15 minutes to make that point. How many of those 15-minute sermons are there? 10,
Not very many.
12, 15? No, it's
It's
not.
just a matter of just find the right topic and hit the play button.
Well, and they say, what's the purpose? You know, I got this when they asked me to do a talk show back in the early OOs. So when one of the one of the radio stations asked me to do it. And I said, I'm not wired for it. Besides, I'm a little too crazy. Because you have to be on for 3 hours every day. And I'm like, I got a business to run. I don't want to be a politician. I don't want to do that. That's when I made the decision to stay with business, which is probably a mistake, by the way.
Just saying.
Just saying. So how many of those sermons? One of the reasons they tell you is that, what does Dr. Phil do? This is the example I got from somebody who worked for Rush Limbaugh. He says, you only have to have 10 answers. And
you can make a show.
And you could make a show. And what does Dr. Phil do? He makes 10 answers. He has only 10 answers, right? And he gives the same 10 answers. But the number of people who need to hear those 10 answers
is a lot.
Because the conditions those 10 answers apply to are
right.
are infinite. And so you've talked about interviewing thought leaders, conservative thought leaders, or people we should not really consider. You talk about bridging the gap, actually, is what.
That's right. Just synapses, closing synapses.
So you want to bridge the gap across the spectrum. And when I'm sitting here thinking as you're talking, right, and you brought that up, because we just talked about Pearl and those guys, why don't we just get ordinary people?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, you are talking.
That's it. Yeah, that's what I meant by that. Because it's like I watch them talking to those people, and it's like just regular people, and just because it's like the people that are regular people, those people are the ones that regular people can identify with. And they can hear you talking to regular people, talking to them by extension. Because that's way more interesting than talking to clerisy.
Well, it would the reason is reality by chanting, right? I mean, there are only, I don't know, how many arcs would we have to.
Well, what'll happen is you're gonna encounter an individual in the wild, okay? And the individual in the wild is gonna process the information that's presented in some weird way, and they're gonna ask you a question that's going to occur to some fragment of the population in the wild that they represent. And it's what's going to happen is you're going to respond naturally to the arc that's created and close the synapse there, because they're going to ask some goofy question and you're going to answer the goofy question with a goofy answer, and it closes the synapse. And that closes the synapses for 10,000 people back here. And then you do that, and you answer your 10 questions, and then close the synapses where the synapse is not closing all the way, and it pyramids out like that.
Right. So we'd originally talked about running a fake court, a court theater. But my problem with that is that I'll end up doing all the fucking talking.
Yeah.
Right? And that it requires a lot of preparation work. Right. And it's too much burdensome. Whereas if you get a bunch of people together and you just have a list of questions that came up in the current events, but all you're really trying to do is find excuses to tell the same 20 stories different ways.
Right. So it's just a matter of what you do is you would sit with people, like some number of people. You sit with people and you chat with them, and you make a recording, and you'll discover what the 10 things are. You don't quite know exactly what the 10 things are. And
Well, sure we do. I mean, I know I can do them off the top of my head. Yeah.
okay.
There's only so many. I mean, in other words, there might be many. There's only what we've got a list of 15 fundamental.
I know, right? It's a short list,
right? I mean, there's only. I can do the whole arc from physics to the present day in law in about. I mean, I did this yesterday, doing my normal speed talk like this, right? I can do it in 15 minutes, but I can really do it in 45 minutes. I mean, people see me do most of physics,
right?
In other interviews, I mean, I can spew this shit off the top of my head, right? But that's just one arc,
right?
That's explaining the consistency of principles across all domains, right? So, but if you have to, but the number of problems, it's like Dr. Phil, the number of problems that people want to solve, they're all the same.
Right, very limited.
All right, and so the number of arcs necessary to explain those problems is fairly small. I mean, we do it all the fucking time.
Right.
Now, what I tell people when they watch this stuff is, what they tell me, is that, the whole thing we're doing is we're just showing this arc and that arc and that arc, and over time, what you see
You'll see them all.
You see them all, right? So, the problem is, who do you invite to that? Because you don't want to invite other
regular people, man.
It's just
I talk to them in my clinic, and I chat with them, and we have conversations of such nature, and it closes synapses. They're nodding their head. They're in agreement. They understand what's happening. And so it's like, if you do the thing, if we say we will study these people that are practicing their craftsmanship online, and they have like maybe 4 people in the group, and they're talking to them, and just talking to them. And that's the model. Like, just study the model of how they're doing their craft, right?
That's how fun that would be to go around in a van.
Yeah.
Go from city to city and set these things up, and people would watch that.
There you have it.
Yeah, I can't do it myself.
I'm gonna watch this show that you just, that little 15, how you proved that I was right. That was good, man. I'm gonna watch it again, because I'm like, that was brilliantly done.
Well, it's because what it is. It's I actually took about 5 seconds to plan it out before I started talking about it. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'll just figure it out. So if I plan it out, it's it's a little easier. If I run down the rat hole really fast ahead of time, then it's a little easier to follow the same steps.
Map it out. Right. It's all right. But shoot, man. Well, like, yeah, I think that's a good operational idea.
Well, it's the best one, and I think that if I talk to the team, it's everyone would say it's doable.
I think so.
It's also an excuse to drive around and
be a dude
and meet people.
Yeah. No, I like that.
All you need is like, you need the chick to set it. You need the chick to set it. I can't do this. So.
I know.
You need a chick to set it. I'm gonna get Veronica to do it, or somebody. Somebody.
Wait.
Who you'd want is Megan, but you'd never get Megan.
Okay.
If you get Megan, that would be great, but I think she's gone off on a. The reason is that she knows the background and material, but we need one of those.
No,
we need a bossy woman like Megan. Megan, if you're out there, it's all said with love.
Come on now. Come on.
You need a bossy woman. She's a bossy Asian woman.
Kurt, we gotta call it a day.
Yep.
Then
okay.
I want you to stop recording when you're ready, and then we'll chat.
Okay, so what I have planned out
Okay.
is I have planned out on my screen here, our working texts. And so as you know, we've got so X number of bullet points, which
Yeah.
the textual summary is the first principles.
Yeah.
Then we have, so I can make sure I don't get this wrong. Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
We have what's in the program, right? Which is the methodology, the, blah, 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 right? And then we have the outline of philosophy as a evolutionary sequence, and how we're mapping what we do to the traditional philosophical categories, right? So that shows, oh, I see, we're going to walk through this stuff, right? And then we have those that list of, what is it, there's 14 first principles.
Yep.
And then we have the ternary logic underneath each of the first principles, right? So that's just like false, true, undecidable. Every principle underneath it. So the statement, the principle, right? And then underneath that, we have the logical explanation, the analytic construction, and then we have the narrative, right? So boom, 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 boom under it. Right? And that gets us our structure. So what I have them up for is, oh God, please help me, Brad, work through this. I'm not sure how much I need you to just be there for moral support.
That's not small. I'm just a little crutch. A cane, like small cane.
It's more like to just make sure I. Anyway.
That's all right.
So I want to go through that, and usually what happens, because that's it, right? That's the assembly process of producing the hard part. Because if you go to our look, we've done the introduction, right? Now we're into the first principles, and so I'm trying to. I want to be. What I don't want to do. Here's what I'm afraid of. This is what happens. I don't want to go through and get a quarter of the way done and say, I did it wrong. And I know that if I start doing it with you, that won't happen.
That won't happen.
That won't happen. Right. So what I'm asking you is to help me not get, because it's overwhelming. It's just so much.
Yeah, I understand.
Having
dove in the deep end here some 18 months ago, 19 months ago, I understand it's overwhelming.
So you look at the one I was thinking about yesterday is I'm trying to say how can I, without writing 100 pages, explain how the brain self-organizes and
I want to help you with that project because I would like to see it done in maybe 10.
Well, I believe I can do it in about that, right?
Okay.
Because I only have to create the operational. I don't have to go down and talk about the axonal cone, right? I mean,
no.
I just have to say, these they get neurons get born here. They sort of sort their way around the brain to the right spot by these chemicals bait them into it.
Right.
And why do those chemicals bait them into it? Because the cells that got generated there were told to turn on that particular thing because the environmental signals from this, right? I mean, and then you end up with your brain sorting these fucking neurons in these different places, and I'm like, I'm saying, well, there's basically one thing. It's a nerve or a neuron.
Right.
But your whole neural system is built out of it. But then that sounds like, well, there's 4 basic structures to a neuron, right? There's, the way they base, or there's 4 basic principles. But, if you want to get into how many fucking neuron, categories, I mean, a neuron can become almost any kind of calculation, right? It's sort of like advanced math, right? If it needs a formula, the neuron can figure out how to calculate the formula.
That's right.
So those things end up in a certain area, And then they send out this axon that's like a penis looking to get laid, right? And because it looks like that, actually, it looks like it's like searching out trying to get laid. And what is it really looking for? It's hunting.
Right.
It's hunting for a chemical signature that suits the chemical signature it wants, and that's how your brain wires itself together, right? But it's sort of like distant cooperation between cells, right? They're trying to figure out how to cooperate together by these signals. Hey, I'm here. Hey, I'm here. Hey, yeah, I'll go find you. Right? And so I actually think I can do that fairly cogently. But the problem you get into is you have to keep it at the operational level. You can't get into talking about. That's what I did with neurons, right? Is I got down into the sodium ions, right?
No, too much.
You can't do that. You've got to stay above, right? I mean, once you're talking about ions and ion channels and charge differences, I mean, it's basically showing people math. We're trying to keep it at the operational level, and I don't want to.
That's right.
And even when I was doing it, I was like, I only want to discuss the level of detail necessary.
Necessary and sufficient.
You're right, necessary and sufficient, but now that's all. You don't need to understand. I mean, because N1, I mean, I can't even do them off the top of my head, but I mean, I can see the diagram of neuron types and what they search for, right? In my head, I can see the picture, but I can't remember what like each one of them is like. Oh, this and this, that, and that, whatever. Right? I mean, God knows, right?
Doesn't matter.
But it doesn't matter if you know that, right?
Right.
You know, it's like knowing your hippocampal regions, right? The entorhinal cortex, right? You know, I can recite them and I can say, well, this connects to that. And I have this beautiful diagram that shows how the brain sorts things and whatever. But I mean, all I got to really say is, you know, this bunch of mess is basically trying to produce this, right? Which is the same thing as your video game produces, right? And it's for exactly the same reason. And the reason you use triangles in a video game is the exact same fucking reason your brain uses triangles, and why the universe is built on triangles. Same fucking reason, right? I mean, I can say all that stuff without getting down into the chemistry.
That's right.
That makes sense. And so what happens when I get overwhelmed is I'm like, how much? I just need to state the laws.
That's right.
If you need to go research that I'm right, go fucking do it, right? You know, I wouldn't put it here if I didn't know, right? So if you need to research more of it, I can tell you whose book to read. I mean,
there you go. Put it in the bibliography, right?
No, I read it. I can see his face off the top of my head, but I can't pull up his name because he looks kind of dorky in all his photos, and it really bothers me because he's really competent. It's not here. I have it in my Kindle library. I can see his face. He's kind of got a tall head and a beard, whatever. He's got a kind of a nerdy expression on, but he's really competent. It's not right. If you want to understand how the brain layers function, I can give you that author. But I'm not going to explain all that. I'm just going to put.
That's right. That's right. That's not your job.
The thing is that to make sure I understand it, I had to write it all down. Right. Myself, right? But those are my notes.
That's right.
I don't have to put that in the book, right? That's like I have to write a textbook on the fucking universe.
No, that's just
that's not helpful.
This is the distilled version for operational people.
It's the same thing with like subatomic physics. It's fucking simple. Right? It really is simple, right? This mathiness bullshit is what makes it crazy, right? I mean,
that's right.
So. You ever seen water? Okay, anyway, that's me. I need to shut up now. So that's me saying, okay, well, that's what I want to work on.
David Sanger.
Sorry, something popped up there. So that's what I want to work on. So whenever we have some time to work on that, that's the next session. What I'm going to start doing with the videos is I'm labeling chats as topics, and when I'm going to call things we actually deal with as sessions.
Okay.
Sessions, topics, sections, sections, chats, and meetings. Why did that have such a hard time coming up on that? Put it down. Oh, it's because I want to say sex, no matter what. All right, do you want me to pause this? So like, subscribe, bell, comment. I hope you got something out of this. Sorry for the long diatribe here at the end, but we do try to
I
keep
enjoyed it.
informed about what it is we're doing, because I know when's the book coming out, when it's fucking done,
Not a minute before.
Love you guys.
Bye-bye.
Oops. I pressed the wrong one. I just want to stop recording.